to Ghouls Night In, the spooky chat show with your best ghoul friends. I'm Penny Snark.
And I'm Midge Monster.
And today I have a topic that was inspired by some of my recent activities.
Oh.
Yes, so I went to the Oddities and Curiosities Expo this weekend. Hashtag not sponsored, just a fun thing that I liked to do. And there are all sorts of really cool, so it's a traveling show with different vendors. There are artists, there are funky antiques, and there is a lot of taxidermy.
I
And
will be going on June 25th here in Kansas City. I'm very excited.
excellent. Yes, and so I think the taxidermy is something that is like cool and creepy in equal measures. So I thought that it had a place on Ghouls Night In.
I love that.
Let's start off with a vibe check. What are your thoughts about taxidermy, Midge?
I was raised in a household that had a lot of taxidermy on display. My father is a hunter, but not like a yee hunter. But we did have like deer heads and turkey. Like we have a whole ass turkey like mounted and flying, like displayed in our basement. So I think I was always raised just kind of around it. So I never really felt like uncomfortable around it or anything. And I think my dad always like used it as an opportunity to teach me about like respect for animals and stuff. So I think it's cool. But yeah, especially like I have kind of a mixed depending on. I think there's a line where I find it disrespectful. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and we'll have a kind of a variety. We'll go through some of the history today. I definitely agree. I did not have any taxidermy in my house growing up, but it is extremely Midwestern. You definitely know someone if you live in the Midwest who has like deer mounts
And
in
it's
their
me.
house or turkeys, or a lot of my friends growing up, I would go to their house and there would be various mounted things. So it is pretty common. And I was also a huge museum fan growing up, and
Yeah.
this will come up a little bit later, but there is a lot of like really cool museum dioramas with things like that. So that's kind of where I have always come from in kind of the world of taxidermy.
Yeah. Again, with my dad being an outdoorsman, we spent a lot of time in like the very fancy outdoor stores
Oh
that have like
yes.
all the very elaborate animal scenes. So
Yes, and I just did want to shout out one of my sources today is a little bit of a spoiler alert for the rest of the
Oh.
episode, but it's from Smithsonian Magazine entitled "Why Taxidermy is Being Revived in the 21st Century."
Ooh.
So let's go way back. So the term taxidermy comes from the Greek taxis, arrangement, and derma, skin. So an
Oh, not a
arrangement
skin
of the
arrangement.
skin. Delightful.
Sounds
Um,
like the world's like most nightmare fueled
all
bouquet.
right.
Send a
Skin
skin
arrangement.
arrangement.
So forms of animal preservation go back as far as ancient Egypt. Obviously, the Egyptians would embalm pets of the royalty to be buried in the tomb, and apparently, like embalm things as big as a hippo, which
Oh
is
wow.
wild. And ancient people, of course, tanned skins for both decorative and functional purposes. But this, wasn't done for the purpose of like emulating that lifelike appearance, which is kind of what we think of for the term taxidermy. And that practice really began in Europe in the 16th and 17th centuries. So the first mounting attempt on record actually happened in the Netherlands. So a wealthy trader was bringing a variety of exotic birds home, but unfortunately they did not survive the trip
Oh
back home.
no.
But he still wanted to enjoy their plumage, so they were skinned, preserved with spices, then wired and stuffed with cotton and posed in, quote, natural poses, which seems to be kind of like, what differentiates taxidermy from any other kind of method of
Yeah.
animal thing.
Did it say, like, what does it mean preserved with spices?
Yeah, so I think it's kind of like how, people in the olden times would like do like salt pork and things like that
Oh,
to kind of
sure.
preserve spices. Like, um, they had different, spices that they knew would, kind of prevent things from spoiling. But you
Huh.
actually have pointed me right to the next point in my
Yay.
document. There was a bird skin collector named Jean Baptiste Becoeur, I will say, who really revolutionized the process when he developed what could it be? Is it our old buddy arsenic?
Ooh,
Yes, it
hey.
is.
The green goddess.
He invented something called arsenical soap, which was a combo of pulverized arsenic, white soap, and calcium oxide.
Hmm.
So it was. So he actually kept this a secret his entire life. So they believe that he invented it around 1743, and this was something that was huge for protecting taxidermied mounts from insects.
Mm. Did, did um did Jean Baptiste die from mysterious poisoning
Right.
causes?
Very possible. But yeah, so he kept it a secret during his lifetime, but like people noticed that his specimens were like much better preserved and that like his collection was not being bothered by bugs. And so they kind of like reversed engineered it after his
Hmm.
death. And this brought the golden age of taxidermy that kind of spanned from 1840 through World War One.
Wow.
So the popularity of taxidermy in this period, I think like it definitely makes sense. It is an opportunity to, see things before like realistic photography was really
Yeah.
available. It was something that was really popular with collectors and with scientists and also just with the general public because, there was no way for you to see any of these super cool birds or like an elephant. Like you would literally never see anything besides an illustration of that until taxidermy came
I think
around.
when we did the sideshow episode, the P.T. Barnum,
Hmm.
the museum that he had, that was like one of his shticks also, was that they had taxidermy.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah, like come see a real life elephant, not a lie.
Right? It's still real life, but this one's dead. Uh, yeah. The quote that I really liked about this, the British zoologist William Swainson, in his treatise on taxidermy from 1840,
Oh.
wrote, "Taxidermy is an art absolutely essential to be known to every naturalist, since without it he cannot pursue his studies or preserve his own materials." So
Hmm.
it really was considered like, a big part of this scientific pursuit.
Yeah.
And taxidermy was also extremely popular in Victorian home decor. Um,
What?
right. Shocking.
The Victorians
Especially
wanted dead things in
dead
their home?
things. Apparently, like birds were kind of like the main, feature for that. But just like today, it was also a way for hunters to display their trophies
Hmm.
from their grand adventures. And as we noted, taxidermy was a big part of a lot of museums. And as we must have every episode, I have a Milwaukee
Oh,
connection.
we need like a theme, like Milwaukee
Oh,
Connection, choo
yes.
choo.
So there is a gentleman named Carl Akeley who is considered the father of modern taxidermy.
What a title.
He invented a new mounting technique that became like the standard that people still use today. And he worked at the Milwaukee Public Museum starting in
Oh.
1886. So he only worked there for, I think, 8 years. And then he went on to be the lead taxidermist at the Field Museum in Chicago. He did the taxidermy for the American Natural History Museum in New York. He did projects for the Smithsonian. And as you just mentioned, he helped mount Jumbo, P.T. Barnum's elephant.
Yeah, boy.
Mm-hmm.
Making those connections at the Milwaukee
Yes, right.
Connection.
Every creepy person is connected, and most of them have something to do with Wisconsin. So I did get like a description of like what this sweet new mounting process was,
Ooh,
and
okay.
it's somewhat complicated. But basically it was a method that really lets you like preserve the like actual shape
Mm.
of the animal. So like instead of just doing like a wire armature, you create like a clay model that like duplicates like the muscle structure, and
Oh,
then you make like a plaster mold so that it's a light frame but it will like hold the skin like in the exact correct position.
that's cool.
And his goal was to create mounts that looked not just lifelike but alive, which I
Ooh,
thought was a cool quote.
that is. That's what a like crazy art form. Like,
Right, yeah. Taxidermy was so popular that like in like England and America, definitely there was a taxidermist. Like every city would have like your
it's like a
taxidermist.
Starbucks, like one on
Yeah.
every corner.
Well, so the 1891 London census showed that there were 369 taxidermists operating just in London, which is one
Wow.
taxidermist for every 15,000 residents at the time.
Wowee. That's crazy.
Yeah, and there was another quote included in this article, which was from Patrick A. Morris's History of Taxidermy, and it said, taxidermists during the late 19th century were treated as just another person who did a job, like a hair barber or a butcher or a window cleaner. Like it was just, a thing that your town had.
Picturing like somebody taking their dry cleaning, but like on the other arm, they've just got like deer skin. They're like, okay,
Yes.
like out to run my daily errands.
It's like, oh, better stop by the grocery store and then I'll drop off these rare birds at the
Yeah.
taxidermist. But yeah, so taxidermy, after this huge boom of it, it did start to lose popularity after World War One, for a couple of different reasons. This was when amateur photography really became a lot more possible
Mm.
for people, so they were able to take photographs. There were also scientific advancements in the ways to colorize photos, and also something that I have kind of in my notes to talk about a little bit later in regards to modern taxidermy. But there was a decline in the acceptability of like big game hunting.
Yeah.
Like, people started to be like, hey, this is kind of fucked up. Maybe we shouldn't go
Hey,
places and kill the animals that live there and
yeah,
then
maybe
bring them
not
back to
that.
our house.
Valid
Yeah.
points.
But taxidermy was definitely a popular folk craft. It was, in fact, even a potential Boy Scout badge. There
Oh
was
my
a
goodness.
taxidermy merit badge introduced in 1911, and 10,344 scouts earned it before it was removed in 1954 for lack of interest.
Hit us up if you're like someone in your life has a taxidermy Boy Scout badge.
Right? Oh
If
my
your
God.
grandfather or your father have
I
a
love that. But yeah, so taxidermy certainly never went away, but it was just nowhere near as prevalent. And I feel like that's probably like the period where it kind of slipped into the weird. Like it was just like a very normal, like home decor kind of thing. And I think
right.
during this period where it fell out of favor, it started to get kind of like that reputation as being something like odd and bizarre.
We love when things fall out of favor and
We
fall into our
certainly
jurisdiction.
do. But as the Smithsonian article promised, taxidermy is experiencing a major upswing these days. It's
Hmm.
got a lot of new interest, and something that I and you, of course, will love. There are a lot more women who are interested in taxidermy.
Yeah. There's
Yeah.
actually a shop in KC. It's one of my favorite like metaphysical shops, and it's woman owned and run. And they, I mean, they have all your general like crystals and all that
Hmm.
stuff. But the women who work there are all taxidermists, and they are when you go in there to shop, they're all in there all day, just in the back with all all
And
these little
doing things, yeah.
animals and stuff, and recompiling skeletons and things. It's very cool.
Right. Yeah. And one of the reasons that was given for the reason that it's more popular is like information, obviously is available online now. So it's much more
Mm.
accessible. Apparently, back in the day, you used to do like mail order taxidermy classes, which
What?
seems very intimidating to me. I would not get um that in the mail and be like, I can do this.
Yeah, they send you like one muscle structure at a time. Like what?
Right.
Yeah, no.
And kind of in the opposite of like the fact that information's available online, people are also looking for like hands-on things. Like we all live so much in a very digital world, and
Mhm.
a lot of people are really seeking hobbies that allow them to make things and feel a lot more, physically connected to life. And I really liked this other quote from Morris that was in the article said, I think people have been insulated from animal specimens for so long that when someone picks up a bone or skull, they are completely knocked out by it, by what an incredible, wonderful thing it is. The same goes for a dead bird. When it is physically in your hand, you want to preserve it, it becomes special. And I
Well, I think
definitely kind of felt that vibe, like, when I'm
yeah.
looking at like this taxidermy, out and about and at the oddities fair, just seeing cool things and being like, yeah, like I love that this is preserved and that we get to keep enjoying it.
Well, it is like, I mean, kind of tying into what you're saying about people wanting to connect with things. Like, there is a real connection to nature and to like our own sense of mortality in it too. I think it's really beautiful. Um, I think it's like the same reason we're seeing a lot of people like pick up roller skating again, right? Like people want to
Yeah.
be outside and want to be like connected to the earth, I think. And yeah, I think it's really cool to, I mean, I'm sure you dissected stuff in school,
I
like
did. I did.
seeing, I don't know, like seeing a living thing and how it's all put together is so fascinating. And it's like, wow, like we're all just a bunch of parts.
We are. Oh my gosh, we are. But yeah, and I think one of the other things that's just really cool about taxidermy is that it really is kind of in this mid zone between science and art.
Hmm.
Like the taxidermists that I was reading interviews from for this, like, they definitely see themselves as artists. This is a creative pursuit, but the highest value is really on this biological accuracy and kind of presenting an animal in the way that it would have lived. It's beautiful and educational.
Love that. Do you, does it, what's the line? Like, because I follow the reason I ask, I follow a woman on Instagram and I wish I could remember her handle off the top of my head. But she preserves, moths and insects and things. I don't, do you know, does that fall in the same category as like taxidermy?
I think that it's a different like I cannot officially say because I am not a taxidermist,
Yeah, I
but
didn't
like
know if it came up in
no,
your research somewhere.
like I feel like I kind of like put them in they're in like the same category of like
Hmm.
preservation, but
Yeah.
I think that like the taxidermy involves some kind of, because like I think with a
Well,
moth that you just like put it up, like I don't,
right.
like you do like a chemical process to it, but I don't think you like take anything out of it or like replace it.
You don't. And would you like to know how I know?
Please tell me.
My gifted program in 8th grade, we did an entire thing on this where we had to collect like all the different types of bugs and preserve. I did a whole bug display project where I like
Ooh.
had to collect them and uh, kill them more or less. Like
Yeah.
you put them in the sad jar. Anyway, so yeah, you're right. You don't, and I guess too, now thinking back on what you said, the origins, taxidermy is skin arrangement. Bugs don't have
Yeah,
skin.
they don't have skin. Although,
So
like, it can involve, I mean, I don't know, do fit? Yeah, fish have skin. I was like, you can do a fish, but I was like, do you call it, like, they're scales, but you do call
well,
it
yeah, they're
skin.
yeah. Well, just this woman that I follow, it's very interesting. She'll like repair wings, like
Oh,
very
yeah, yeah.
very intricate, detailed, like putting, repairing the wing, repairing the body, like exoskeleton. It's fascinating to watch. Really really
Yes,
beautiful.
definitely not trying to minimize
Oh no no no.
insect mounting. I didn't want to be like, well, you don't do anything. I just mean you do a different set of things than
Yeah,
this thing. But I'm actually not sure if it includes
drop
bugs.
in if you're a taxidermist.
Yes.
All of our many listeners that I'm sure are taxidermy
I wouldn't be
professionals.
surprised if we had a
Yeah.
few.
Yeah.
But yeah, and something else that is very important and interesting in modern taxidermy, I think, is this increased focus on ethical sourcing.
Hmm.
So I did see that in several of the booths that I saw at the Oddities Fair, where they had a little sign up, saying that none of the animals here died for the purpose of taxidermy. People, take roadkill, or there was one taxidermist I read an article about who like works with like a state invasive species
Oh.
arm, where like they are removing this invasive species, but she is able to then give those birds a new life as taxidermies.
Hmm.
But you also see, a big raise in faux taxidermy, like in interior design. Like I'm sure you remember that period where those like cardboard deer heads
Hell yeah.
were super popular. Or there are people, I follow an artist on Instagram called Misfit Menagerie, and she makes like plush taxidermy
I
mounts,
also
which,
follow Misfit
right?
Menagerie.
So cute.
She
Um,
has a flamingo head that I want so badly for my
Oh,
Palm
that would be
Springs room.
so good. Or potentially the next stage, something that I saw at the Oddities Fair that I was really interested in, 3D printing.
Oh,
This
cool.
gentleman had a wide variety of like posed skeletons, basically, and a note that these are all 3D printed for sustainability purposes, which
That's
I thought was
cool.
really cool. And that's I do have a piece that some of you who follow me may have seen it, that I actually bought at a previous Oddities and Curiosities Expo, that is a human skull with butterflies. It is certainly not a real human skull. It is a resin skull, but with real butterflies. But like you can definitely do things like that where you can replicate the look of some of these remains in order to make it both more sustainable and more accessible to people. It's certainly more affordable to have a 3D printed or a
Right.
molded skeleton piece.
My wheels are spinning now because I don't know if I've shared this with you yet, but in the course of 6 months, my husband has acquired not one but three 3D printers. And
Hmm.
we have a whole 3D printing set up in our house now, and I'm like, ooh, you could print
Time
me
to
a
print some
little skelly
skeletons.
skeleton.
Yes. And I will say the one other big category that we are not going to talk about today is gaff taxidermy, because that could be a whole episode on itself, and maybe it will be. But that is what it is referred to when it is a a made up taxidermy. So
Mm-hmm.
if you see like
Like a
most two-headed ducklings or things like that,
jackalopes.
jackalopes, those are called gaffs. And I think I'm going to save that and maybe do a gaff taxidermy episode at some point if people are into it.
Yeah, hit us up for part 2.
Yeah, sound off in the comments if you want to see some gaff taxidermy. But yeah, that was my kind of a history of taxidermy. I think it's a really interesting art. I'm not sure that I would want to do it myself. Like there was like at the fair they had like a class that you could sign up
Mm-hmm.
for where you were making your own little mount, and as you mentioned, like dissecting stuff, I was definitely the person who like took the notes and let my lab partner do all of the dissecting, because I don't like to touch gross things.
Hi, it's me, your lab
Uh,
partner.
so maybe if you and I can do a co-taxidermy class, and I can observe and you can do all of the touching parts.
That place in Kansas City that I was talking about, they do classes, and I've thought about it several times. I think it would be really, really interesting.
It is super interesting. Like I've watched some like YouTube videos of people like doing I don't know if that's correct. I don't think you
Do
would say doing a
doing a
taxidermy,
taxidermy.
just doing a taxidermy, um, creating a taxidermied mount. But yeah, it's super fun. And since you brought up moths, I don't know if it's technically taxidermy, but I bought a super sweet mounted moth at the
Ooh, nice.
convention that I'm so excited to hang up. It's in a beautiful vintage frame, and I'm very excited.
Can't wait for you to send me a picture of that as soon as we're done here today.
Yes. I was going to send it to you in advance, and then I was like, no, I'm going to tell her on the podcast.
I'm gonna make it a surprise.
Oh my goodness. But yeah, highly recommend checking out an Oddities and Curiosities Expo if it's coming near you. Great opportunity to check out and shop with a lot of dark vendors. And let us know if you had taxidermy in your house when you were growing up, slash, are you from the
I was gonna
Midwest?
say, yeah, let us know if you're also Midwest trash.
True. Or if there is an awesome diorama that you've seen in a museum that you would love to share, feel free to shoot it over. I like seeing cool stuff.
Yes, me too. Love cool stuff. Big fan.
Love cool stuff. Um, and if you love cool and spooky stuff, make sure you're subscribed to this podcast because we talk
Yeah.
about cool stuff every week. And if you would like to help share the podcast, it really helps us out if you give us a rating and review on your podcatcher of choice. And if you would like to follow along and see what else we're doing, see photos of taxidermy and things like that, you can find us on Instagram at Ghouls Night in Pod.
And if you are looking for us individually, you can find me across all platforms at Midge Monster.
And you'll find me at Penny Snark. And until next time,
Goodbye.
goodbye.